Ukrainian army has launched a comprehensive operation against ammunition depots on Russian soil. There are violent explosions in the area. Simultaneous operations began. Russia's connection between the eastern and southern fronts is about to be broken. Both Ukraine and Russia are expected to start extensive operations. As a result of the operations initiated by Ukrainian army, Russian troops were withdrawn significantly. Most of the key areas came under the control of Ukrainian forces. Russia withdrew and increased its shipments in the region. In a short time, very violent operations will begin. Ukrainian forces, on the other hand, destroyed ammunition depots on Russian territory and on the front line in order to stop Russia's preparation process. Moscow lost a great deal of power on the Eastern Front. Simultaneously, a report was published that Ukrainian troops began operations in the vicinity of Kherson. Violent attacks began in the regions of Zaporizhia, Donetsk, Luhansk, Kinburn, Bakhmut, and Kherson. Russian forces began to retreat. However, if Moscow cannot stop the Ukrainian attacks, it will have to withdraw from the Zaporozhye and Kinburn regions. Russian troops were surrounded. British intelligence warned Ukrainian armed forces. Russia significantly increased its shipments. Ukrainian army formed many fronts and began intensive shipments. New systems have reached Ukrainian army. The relocation of the war to Russian territory made Putin very angry. Tension rose considerably. A massive fire broke out in the morning hours at an oil depot in the Bryansk region of Russia. According to the first statements of the Russian media, it is thought that the oil facilities and ammunition depot in the region were attacked with an unmanned aerial vehicle or missile. Where experts think a drone orchestrated the attacks. While Ukrainian army did not make a statement about the attacks, many videos of the explosions were published. With the explosion of the ammunition depot, a big fire broke out in the area. The explosion of the oil tanker also increased the severity of the attack. Russian troops still could not contain the fire. Work continues in the area. However, Russian air defense systems stationed on the borderline are actively working. Despite these air defense systems, the ability of unmanned aerial vehicles to enter the Bryansk region caused great reactions from Moscow. The fire has been going on for about 4 hours and firefighters cannot intervene in the area. The continuation of both oil and ammunition explosions in the region prevents the fire from being extinguished. In this process, Russian troops on the Eastern Front suffered great losses. Kremlin warned the Russian troops on the borderline. It is thought that Ukrainian army may attack the region again. Russian air defense systems and radars on the borderline cannot detect these unmanned aerial vehicles. For this reason, it was announced that new air defense systems and radars will be deployed on the border of the Bryansk region. Russian Ministry of Defense reacted to the commanders on the Eastern Front. But we do know that Russian radar systems have failed. Therefore, air defense systems cannot directly destroy unmanned aerial vehicles. Russian army has a large amount of military equipment in its military inventory, but this military equipment is considered to be quite old and outdated defense systems. The fact that the Russian army is having trouble with ammunition clearly reveals this situation. However, Ukraine began to establish many factories and make agreements with Western countries to produce a new generation of military equipment. In addition, as a result of agreements with Turkey, Kiev received a large number of unmanned aerial vehicles. It is known that the unmanned aerial vehicles sent by Turkey can easily operate without being caught by Russian radars. We have seen this clearly both in the Azerbaijan-Armenia war and in the Syrian operations. Bayraktar 2 terabit unmanned aerial vehicles successfully destroyed the S-300 air defense systems. It is not known which drone carried out the attacks. However, Russian radars could not detect the attacking drones. In the Bakhmut region, it was seen that the shipments of armored vehicles and tanks belonging to Ukrainian army accelerated. It was detected that 10 heavy battle tanks moved to the front. During this period, the intensity of conflicts in the region increased considerably. Ukrainian army wants to seize full control of the Bakhmut region and occupy an advantageous position in the Luhansk and Donetsk regions. In this process, it was seen that Ukrainian army also carried out operations in the Zaporozhye region. If these simultaneous operations are successful, Russian troops in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions may be encircled. However, the war on the Eastern Front is expected to continue for a while, because the Russian soldiers escaping from the borderline are escaping directly to the territory of Russia. Moscow wants to push the boundaries of war by increasing its shipments and offensive capabilities, because the Russian troops on the territory of Ukraine did not achieve any success. Since the beginning of the war, Russian army has been experiencing great difficulties in logistics support. In addition, Moscow wants to restart the use of nuclear weapons in case Ukraine carries out new attacks on Russian territory, because Putin knows that he cannot achieve success on Ukrainian soil. Moscow wants to end the war by using nuclear weapons in this process. There are many Wagner mercenaries and Kadyrov's troops on the Eastern Front. We know that Kadyrov reacted very harshly to the Russian commanders on the Eastern Front, but Kadyrov's troops continue to suffer record losses. In this process, we can say that Kadyrov has kept his silence. The problem is not with Russian commanders or military equipment. The biggest problem is that because of Putin's ambitions, he launched attacks on Ukrainian territory. Most Russians don't want to go to war in Ukraine. This situation and the losses of Russian army greatly damaged the morale of the Russian soldiers at the front. The soldiers in Ukrainian army, on the other hand, are aware that they are fighting for the freedom of Ukrainian lands and go to the front voluntarily. It is known that the morale of Ukrainian army is quite high due to the victories won in this process. It is known that the soldiers of Ukrainian army are also quite experienced. Due to the shortage of soldiers, Putin declared a massive mobilization and sent large numbers of inexperienced soldiers to the front. For this reason, the losses of Russian army began to increase day by day. In this process, Russian army has lost approximately 88,880 soldiers, 2,914 tanks, and 5,872 armored combat vehicles since the beginning of the war. In one day, Russian troops lost 512 more soldiers. Russian army loses an average of 500 soldiers every day. In this case, I can say that the morale of the Russian soldiers is quite natural to drop. Russian army lost 5 heavy battle tanks, 7 armored vehicles, 2 artillery units, 1 air defense system, 8-ton manned aerial vehicles, and 7 fuel tankers in one day. Russian army suffered its greatest losses in the Bakhmut region. On the other hand, President of Ukraine Zelensky made very critical statements about the front line, noting that the Russian forces tried to advance especially on the Donetsk front, but Ukrainian army continued to successfully repel the Russian attacks. Zelensky said, "The situation on the front is dire," claiming that Russian army had suffered great losses to advance on the Donetsk front. Zelensky noted that Ukrainian forces did not allow the Russian troops to advance here. It is known that all 10 attacks of the Russian army on Donetsk and Luhansk regions were repelled by Ukrainian army and counterattacks began. Zelensky stated that Russian forces are trying to hold the settlements they control in the Luhansk region and to advance into the Kharkiv region and the south of Ukraine. Stating that Russia committed a crime by starting a war in Ukraine, Zelensky said that they are making great efforts to prosecute Russia's top political and military officials. United Nations announced the formation of a delegation to conduct a comprehensive investigation into the war on Ukrainian soil. The delegation will make investigations on the front line in the region in a short time. The tension is increasing day by day. Will